The 3.5 million Americans who drive a truck for a living, and the over 5 million Americans who work at truck stops, motels, and diners around the country that rely upon the truckers getting out and stopping. So when I went to Washington, D.C. with all this set of problems, and as Lacey and Marseille said, I did write a book about this stuff, and I'm a pretty cool guy. Read the book. So I went to Washington, D.C. and I'll try and sign that for you, thank you. I went to Washington, D.C. with a set of problems, and I said, look, Donald Trump's our president because we're in the midst of this fourth industrial revolution. We need to have real solutions. And what do you think the folks in D.C. said to me when I presented them with this set of problems?
Come back later.
Come back later, don't talk to me, who are you? The real responses I got were, number one, we cannot talk about this. Number two, we should study that. Number three, we must educate and retrain Americans for the jobs of the future. And the third one said, this person behind me just said it doesn't work. Who was that? Yeah, that's right, man, it doesn't work. So then I said, I looked at the numbers. And we're terrible at retraining. The effectiveness rate of federally funded retraining programs is between 0 and 15% a year. And when I said that to the folks in DC, you know what they said to me? They said, I guess we'll get better then. And so I had to take the train back from DC thinking, like, are we this backward as a country that we can't even wake up to the challenges? That somehow we're blaming immigrants? When it is not immigrants, it is technology that is causing these dislocations? And one person in Washington, D.C. said something to me that has been motivating me to this day. And I'm so glad I had someone with me because he can vouch for this conversation because it sounds like I just made it up. He says, Andrew, no one in Washington, D.C. will do anything about the set of problems you're talking about. Because this town is not a town of leaders, this is a town of followers. And the only way that we will do something is if you create a wave in other parts of the country and bring it crashing down on our heads. And that's the only way we will wake up. And you know what I said to that? I said, challenge fucking accepted. With you tonight, Atlanta. That is why we are going to make the freedom dividend mainstream wisdom in 2020, and it's going to be the first thing I do as president in 2021. Yes. So this freedom dividend, that sounds so radical. The first time you heard about it, you were like, ha ha, like, that sounds too good to be true. I went through a bit of the history. I went through the fact that Alaska's doing it, and that if Alaska's doing it with oil money, then we can do it with technology money. And I want you all to think about what it would mean for you and everyone in Atlanta if you all got $1,000 a month. Woo! Where would you spend it? What would you do with it? Bills. Dogs, I like him. He's a dog owner, that's right. America should be able to own dogs, am I right? Yeah. What kind of country is it if you can't afford to own a dog?
Savings.
What else?
Savings, investments.
Savings, right. Bills. So we're in a country where right now 78% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck, including many of our friends and neighbors. 57% cannot afford an unexpected $500 bill. Our life expectancy has declined for the last 3 years because of surges in suicides and drug overdoses. And our mental health is at crisis levels where we have anxiety and depression and stress at unprecedented heights in our country. So $1,000 a month, what's it going to do? It's going to make it so that we can actually breathe easier. We can get the boot off of our own throats. And most of that money would stay right here in your local communities. You would be giving it to local service providers and vendors, and a lot of those people would then turn around and maybe even hire more people. How many of you think you might start a business if you were getting $1,000 a month?
Yes.
That's exactly right. I'm an entrepreneur, and I know that most entrepreneurs are not on their last dollar trying to figure out how to make ends meet, and then they go, oh, I think I'm gonna start a business. Like, that's not the way it works at all. The way it works is that when you can get your head up and you can see that your future is secure, and then you can start solving problems for yourself and people around you. That's when you start a business. So this is the freedom dividend. It's going to make our communities stronger. It's going to make us healthier and mentally healthier. And the Democratic Party talks about empowering women all the time. And we know that there are thousands of women right here in Atlanta and millions around the United States that are in exploitative or abusive jobs or relationships because they lack the economic freedom to walk away. And there is nothing more real we could do to empower those women than to give them $1,000 a month. The Democratic Party can either talk about empowering women or we can do something about it, and I say we do something about it. What do you think of that? The Democratic Party talks about empowering communities of color and marginalized people, and I'm going to say that $1,000 a month would go much further to help African Americans and communities of color who have lower access to education and resources and opportunities. We can talk about empowering African Americans or other communities where we can do something about it, and I choose to do something about it. What is And the great thing is there is nothing stopping a majority of citizens in a democracy from declaring ourselves a dividend. Nothing at all. All we have to do is get a majority of us to wake up and say, you know what? He's talking sense. I think a dividend's a good idea, and then I will run the table, and I will pass this as president in 2021. Now, you all seem very, very young and healthy, so this might not be as pressing for you, but we also have to get health care off the backs of American people. Because right now it's the leading cause of bankruptcy, it's making us miserable. We spend twice as much on our health care as other countries to worse effects. And when we get sick or injured, or our loved ones get sick or injured, we are more stressed out about navigating our crazy system and paying the bills than we are about getting healthy. And it's totally unnecessary. We can make it better. And anytime someone says, where are you going to get the money for single-payer health care? I'm for Medicare for all, public option, single-payer health care. And I'll say thank you, Bernie Sanders, for mainstreaming that. I got to give it up to Bernie. But when people say, where are you going to get the money, they're out of their minds. We spend 18% of GDP already, and the money's coming out of families' pockets and companies' pockets and just getting passed along to us anyway. We have this giant private insurance system that's siphoning off billions and billions of dollars, and then you're like, where are you going to get the money? Are you kidding me? We're going to save so much money just by getting rid of this giant matrix of middlemen that really do nothing except extract value for themselves. And the third thing we're going to do, I'd like to talk about my wife a little bit. First, how many of you woke up this morning and you were excited about GDP? You're like, I'm going to make a big contribution today, I can feel it. And on a serious note, my wife is at home right now with our two boys, one of whom is autistic. What is her work calculated at a GDP?
0.
What is the market value of her work at?
0.
And we know that's nonsense. We know that her work is some of the most important and challenging and vital work being done in our society today. So if we use GDP as our measuring stick, we're going to follow it off a cliff. Robot trucks will be great for GDP. They're going to be terrible for human beings. So what would you all get excited about if it was the way we actually measured progress? If GDP is obviously a joke to you all, what might actually excite you when you wake up in the morning?
Bitcoin.
Mental health. Yeah, how about mental health and freedom from substance abuse?
Woo!
How about our own health and life expectancy?
Woo!
How about how clean our air and water are? How about average income and affordability? So believe it or not, that's the way we can measure economic progress. We made up GDP almost 100 years ago. And even the inventor said 3 things. Number 1, this is a terrible measurement for national well-being, and we should not use it as that. Number 2, we should include parenthood and motherhood because it's so important. And number 3, we should not include military defense spending because it adds no economic value. And of course we ignored all of that, and now we're just like, yeah, GDP, and then we're just gonna ride it until we die. So, believe it or not, as president, it's gonna be very easy for me to upgrade us from GDP. All I have to do is go down the street to the Bureau of Labor and Statistics and say, hey, GDP, really old, very out of date. We're now going to start using this basket of indicators called the American Scorecard, and I'm going to present it to you, the American people, every year at the State of the Union. I'm gonna be the first president to use a PowerPoint. That's right. I'm just going to say, here are the actual measurements. Here's how we're doing, here's what we're going to do better, instead of these bizarre theater performances we're subject to that are unwatchable. Like, what the heck is going on? You turn this on and you're like,